Another day and another teaser from another content creator, just like how it's been the past couple of days. In today's video, we're going to be talking about myth teasers and the teasers that were given to Sauce. So Sauce got his own set of teasers that were given to him, and the ones that were specifically given to him were myth. So anything revolved around myth, he was given. So we're going to be doing a little bit more of a deep dive on that, talk about some of the spell changes, of course, and give you guys my thoughts and opinions. But remember to show the original creator some support. Sauce's video will be linked in the description, so definitely watch his video whenever it's out at this point, and give him your support as always. And there will be more teasers later on this week. I think we have 3 more teasers, I believe. I think it's Ice, Fire, and Storm. I could be wrong, but I believe those are the teasers I left in order. I don't have the dates memorized, I'll be honest. But be on the lookout for whenever those teasers happen. And of course, my teasers will be on Sunday, so be on the lookout for that. But let's go over some of the changes and stuff that he was given, as well as the whole shadow pack system as a whole. I've kind of been doing this for the past couple days and giving you guys thoughts and opinions, as well as expanding on the whole shadow pack system and trying to explain it a little bit more thorough, and so hopefully you guys get a better experience. So we do have a shadow transformation that was shown with his teasers, which is Shadow Nova. Now, the Nova spell was originally given to Storm. I believe in the original Shadow Pack teasers, they were like showcasing an example of Storm, and they showed how Nova was tied to Storm, but they changed it. So now the creature, like the icon or like the spell animation, whatnot, is now given to Myth. So Shadow Nova is the transformation. You can transform into Nova, which is pretty sick. And what Nova does is it gives you 50% pierce. So this is literally just Shrike. This is the equivalent of Shrike. And then on top of that, you do get 1 Myth Pip, so that's very good. And then on top of that, the Shadow Pact is having traps on the enemy. So once per round, it will take a trap. If there is no trap, it's going to proceed to take 5% of your max HP. Below, you guys should see a description of how the system works. Just read that. I've kind of explained it in all my videos, so definitely read that. It'll give you a better understanding. And then, of course, we do have the Shadow Creature that was given to Myth, and this is going to be used to fuse all the other spells to get those Shadow Enhanced variations, and it's called Dark Nova. Dark Nova, what it does 75 Shadow damage, and then it proceeds to put a fuel on the enemy that's basically a universal trap. So universal fuel, that's a plus 30% trap, and then on top of that, the Shadow Pact is you have to have weaknesses on yourself. So you're not really going to be just tossing this out willy-nilly, because this requires the enemy to put weaknesses on you. So if you don't have any sort of negative charm, whether it be infections, whether it be a dispel, whatnot, you'll just lose 5% of your max HP. So be very careful when you're using this. Of course, it's good to counter, of course, but if you're just trying to just toss it out for the hit and the fuel, it's not going to be that easy, because if you don't have those weaknesses, negative charms, whatnot on you, it's not going to be that viable. But hey, be careful when you do try to use this, of course. So that's the whole Shadow Pack system for Myth, kind of a straightforward system. And then as well, the description at the bottom kind of just explains it, and kind of went over it so many times at this point. If need be, I will probably make a separate video just talking about Shadow Packs and explaining it a little bit more thorough. But that's Shadow Packs as a whole. Now let's go use Mystic Colossus as an example. Now Mystic Colossus currently in game, because I had to do a PvE match. Now I don't do PvE, but I had to do PvP so I can get 1 spell limit of Mystic Colossus so I can showcase this. But currently Mystic Colossus, what it does is it removes a shield off of everyone, and then it does 635 mid damage to all enemies. And then if you want to use the PvP / advanced combat version that's allowed, is what it does is a select target. It steals 4 shields, and then it does 4 damage, but I'm pretty sure this is a visual bug, because it does not do 4 damage, right? Even I know it doesn't do 4 damage. What it's supposed to say is 375 damage, but the card text has been bugged for a while, so just be wary about that. It's actually doing 375 damage. And then we have the new paths as well as the Shadow Fusion, so we can put that on screen and you guys can see what we're talking about. So the new paths are at the bottom, which is the new path, and as well as the Shadow Fusion. And then bottom left, there's an image of what it would look like in game if you had both of the required cards in your hand. So if you look at the new path of Mystic Colossus, the one that's allowed in PvE is only, so it's still removing that shield, but the damage is significantly nerfed, and it's doing 290 damage to all targets. Then we do have the one that's allowed in advanced combat and whatnot. It's doing 390 damage and stealing 4 shields. Now, I do want to preface this. This is technically a buff by like slightly, at least for the advanced combat version that doesn't have a shad. Or that does have a shad, it is a slight buff, but still, I mean, I guess it depends on how you view it, because we'll be talking about the Shadow Fusion one. So if you look at the Shadow Fusion variations of Mystic, the left one is where it removes 1 shield and does 790, so this is a strong variation of Mystic that already exists in the game. So this is way stronger than the one that we already have. And then the right variation of Mystic, which is doing 735 damage, select target, and then it's putting 3 minus 55 shields. And the shadow pact on both of these is that you have to have shields on the enemy. So if there's an enemy doesn't have shields and whatnot, you have to make sure that they have it per round. If they don't have it per round, what's going to end up happening is you will be losing 5% of your max HP. So they just need to have a singular shield. They don't need to have the whole shebang. They just need a single shield per round, which is still very annoying to just to even achieve, if you think about it, because it's not something you can put. You kind of have to react upon the enemy. So that's kind of what Myth's shadow packs are kind of looking like at the moment. Just remember though that you can pick which fusion you want as the outcome. So for example, if I chose the right fusion, which is the shadow fusion of Mystic Colossus that has the 3 shields, I can combine the new Mystic that's doing 290 myth damage that just removes a shield, and I can combine it with the Dark Nova, and it'll create the outcome of the right image. So of course you have a little bit more leeway on what you want as your fusion, and it will be kind of interesting to see different things that people come up with. Of course, there's multiple paths. We even have to get spell elements for these fusions as well, so it's going to combine like a spell element of the original spell plus some other stuff that we have no clue what it's going to be currently. So be on the lookout for that information whenever we find more about it. We probably might not find out till the actual live realm, or not live realm, till the actual test realm comes out. So just we have to wait till then. If you guys have made it this far into the video, just wanted to remind you guys that 75% of you guys that watch me on a daily basis are not subscribed. So do me a huge favor and subscribe. We're on that grind to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. All right, now let's get back into the rest of the video. So now that we got that out the way, let's start actually talking about the other spells that got changed as well. Of course, Mystic is just one of the few examples that we're just going to be using. And for all the videos, I'm kind of just using the original Darkmoor spells that you get from Graveyard as an example to set the stone for the rest of the video. So all these spells are going to require a Nova if you want the Shad variation, and you have to combine it. So just remember that when we're moving forward. But the first spell that we're going to be talking about, other than the Darkmoor stuff, is Witch's Housecall. Now, Witch's Housecall currently in game, if we pull it up wherever it is at this point, let's see. Here we have Witch's Housecall. Now, currently what it does is at max tier on path A, it's doing 1100, and then it's doing up to 1200 as well. And then it summons a myth minion, which, I mean, a myth minion no one really uses. It's just, they kind of just like disabled it and just doesn't do anything and whatnot. Anyways, the path to B is doing 655, and it's summoning that myth minion again, which, I mean, it doesn't do anything. Just don't treat it as like it's the most end all be all minion. It doesn't do anything. So realistically, you're just spending 6 pips on the Shad to do 655 myth damage. So that's the current one. Now, if we venture into the new Witch's Housecall, top path is doing 610 myth damage, and then path B is doing 525 myth damage, and then on top of that, it is actually gambiting 2 damage over time. So, depending on how many damage over time you gambit, it will put 60% traps. Now, this is actually really good. I mean, it has really good utility for advanced combat and whatnot, because the fact is, that means it can gambit up to 2 dots. So even if you have a singular dot on the enemy, it takes that away and puts 2 60% traps. Now, if there's 2 dots, you can put 4 60% traps. So I guess this is our advanced combat allowed variations of feints. This is a really good spell, and I'm just being honest. So I know some people are like, they don't like certain changes and whatnot, but I think we can kind of agree in unison that Witch's Housecall is very strong. It's literally advanced combat allowed feints and universal, so very good change in my opinion. I know PvP players might have their own take, but for me, for advanced combat, rematches, whatnot, challenge mode, that is so free, and you don't need a Shad. Like literally, you do not need a shad. So this is going with the assumption that you are fighting somebody in advanced combat challenge mode that allows you to dot and trap. So that's something you do have to remember. But still, very interesting version of Witch's House Call and very good. And then, of course, if you have Dark Nova and you combine it with any variation of Witch's House Call, you can pick which version of Witch's House Call, the Shad variation, you want. So if you see Path A, max tier for tier 3, is doing 1560, summons a minion, and puts two 70% traps on the enemy. Now, don't know why we're still keeping the minion if, you know, we don't have a minion audit anytime soon. It doesn't really matter of why we're keeping that minion, but I mean, hey, if we're keeping the minion for now, I guess we can. But I think technically I feel like they should remove that minion and put like another trap or something, or buff the damage slightly, because I don't think we need that minion still on that card. It doesn't really help us in any sort of way. That's just my take. And then the shadow pact is you need damage overtimes on the enemy. Now, I'm not too much of a fan of the shadow pact, I will be honest, because if you don't have a damage overtime on the enemy, you lose 5% of your max HP. But if you do have a damage overtime, it'll take it away. But at the same time I don't know how it's going to work, because you also have traps on the enemy that are universal. So aren't those traps just going to be straight up just be used by that damage overtime in return? I don't know. Then we have the Path B variation of Witch's House Call, which is doing 885 mid damage, and then it puts 570% traps on the enemy. Yeah. Yeah. And then, yes, the Shadow Pact is you only damage overtimes on the enemy. Now, same thing, same logic applies. You have to take a dot every round, right? If you don't have a dot, you lose 5% of your max HP. Starting out at 0% lash, and every time you mess up, you lose 5%. But if you do have a damage overtime, it'll take it away. So the thing is, though, like, if the tick goes off on that damage overtime, it's going to waste your 70% trap. So you technically have to play cautious around that. But if you just are like, hey, I guess in certain strats, if you do not care about the damage overtime, you're like, hey, man, I don't care. I'll take the minus 15% in total. I don't care. You can do some strong hits in return. So I guess that's like, it's like caveat. And honestly, I'm okay with it. I wish it was maybe something else, but honestly, I think it's okay for the value you're getting. You're getting 5 freaking feints on the enemy. So that is good. And even the base variation without the shad is very good. I think this is a complete good rework of Witch's House Call, whether it be for PvP or advanced combat. I'm kind of all for it, but you do have to remember you need dots on the enemy, and that's going to be annoying for PvE players, but for advanced combat players, it's okay if you lose that minus 15%. Now, of course, depending on the fight, I guess, you can make that argument, like, what if I'm taking too much damage and whatnot, then yeah, maybe you don't want to lose that minus 15% for not having dots on the enemy. But if it's like on a support and whatnot, it doesn't really matter. A support can literally run this just for the utility aspect of this spell. So just gonna put that out there, and it's gonna be quite interesting. I will say it will be quite interesting. Now let's move on over to Snake Charmer. Now, just like I said in my previous videos, and I'm going to be saying this moving forward, I really wish the top paths of these were just AoEs. I wish they were just 4 pips that were just AoEs, straightforward, because this whole divide mechanic was not it on release in my opinion, and I know some people have the same viewpoint as me. I still think that they should have changed this, but anyway, currently Snake Charmer at max tier, it's doing 860, and then you divide it to an enemy, so it just cuts it in half per divide. So if you split it against 4 targets, it's only doing 25% of its original value on each target. So just be wary with divides. And then path B, it's a select target, and it's doing 360 damage, and then it puts a 350 bomb on the enemy, which is kind of like, I didn't see much use in my opinion. I still don't, but that's just my honest take on Snake Charmer. But let's look at the new Snake Charmer. So the new Snake Charmer without a shad is doing a 45 damage hit, and then it puts a 430 damage over time on the enemy. So it's no longer a bomb, it's a damage over time. So I think this is still pretty good, just because the fact is you can use it, break a shield, and then you can put a damage over time on them. For 4 pips, I think that's completely fine, and you can gambit that and do some crazy stuff with it. So I have no issue with that Snake Charmer. And then we have Path B, which is clearing 3 negative charms, and then it puts a damage over time that's 225 for 3 rounds, and then it proceeds to do 330 damage. Now this Snake Charmer is literally just a Stone Colossus, but instead of it clearing 5, which Stone Colossus does, Snake Charmer is clearing 3. And Stone is putting a bomb while Snake Charmer is putting a dot. And the damage Snake Charmer is doing is 330, like the initial hit, while Stone is doing 615 at max tier. So this is going to kind of reinforce that fact of, hey, Myth is known to clear negative charms. There you go. So quite interesting to see. I think people might pack both. For advanced combat stuff, I'm not too sure yet how I'm going to be using this in any sort of rematch challenge mode. I feel like this one is like one of the ones where I'm just like, okay, maybe I need to get my hands on it to actually see if I want to use it. But while if we look at Baba Yaga, I'm like, okay, we need to use Baba Yaga. That 70 like feints and stuff like that, like we need that. We need that. So that's my honest take on Snake Charmer. But let's look at the shadow enhanced variations of Snake Charmer, where you fuse it with Dark Nova to be able to get these fusion variations of these spells. So you can kind of pick which one you want, of course, but at max tier, Snake Charmer for Path A at least is doing 925 damage, which is stronger than the original Snake Charmer that's in this game currently. And there's no longer divide. It's a select target, of course, which is honestly better. Select targets are just better than divide mechanic, so it's stronger now. And then on top of that, the pact is, which is I guess the downside of this portion, is you need to have negative charms on yourself. If you don't have negative charms on yourself, you're going to be losing 5% of your max HP per turn, up to 3 turns. So if you don't have those negative charms, you got to be careful. And then Path B is doing 645 damage, which is stronger, and then it's putting a 350 dot that lasts 3 rounds. So it is stronger than the original Snake Charmer that does exist in the game, and it's no longer a bomb that's in the original, like currently game. Now it's a damage over time. So it is stronger, but you will need negative charms on yourself. And I'm not too much of a fan of either variation of the Snake Charmer, just because the Snake Charmer that is already 4 pips is just better in my opinion, at least for the Path B, because yes, Snake Charmer is going to be technically clearing 1 negative charm per round up to 3 rounds. But if you just use the Path B originally, you can do a little bit less damage, and you don't have to worry about someone gambling those negative charms for something else and, you know, doing more damage and whatnot. So you kind of run the risk with the Shadow Pact of like, hey, that needs to be on you for 3 rounds straight. And if it's not, well, you lose 5% of your max HP per turn that is not there. So I think the original Snake Charmer, like just the one that doesn't have the Shad, is better, but the Shad enhanced variations of Snake Charmer, both paths, I'm not a fan. I think top path Snake Charmer should be an AoE, and I think path B, I don't know what they could realistically do. I feel like maybe put an additional dot, like split that damage over time into 2 dots. I don't know if that's too strong, but I might, that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. I don't think I would want, I don't know, my mind just says split that damage over time into 2 separate dots, because then you can do some things where you gambit those dots later, and maybe you can do something out of it. I don't know. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards right now, Snake Charmer. But still, 4 pip AoEs, just make them a thing, please, please. But let's move on to the next spell, which is Tatzelworm Terror, and I haven't seen this spell in eons at this point. But Tatzelworm, what it does at max tier currently in game, and this is the era where they did 5, 6, 7 pips, and at max tier it's doing 700 through 840 myth damage, and it has a 50% to confuse the target. And confuse was one of the most annoying mechanics. It still is, just because you have a chance of like hitting your enemy or hitting your allies, you have a chance of blading the wrong person, trapping the wrong person. Confuse is not I don't like the mechanic, just because it adds an RNG aspect, which Myth isn't really known to do RNG, but I mean it's known for stunning, so I guess Confuse can follow underneath that aspect, then I can kind of understand. But that was max tier, and then Path B, it was a 480 select target, and then putting 2 40% traps on the enemy, which are universal. But just remember, Path A was in AoE. So now what they did with Tatzelworm Terror, with the new changes, it's a 355 AoE, and then it has a 50% chance of confusing the target. Now, I know some people are going to ask, is this a good spell to use and whatnot? Like, is this something that, you know, I should use? Now, look, It round one, is it better than a Humunga Frog? Yes, but once you get access to your Wallaroo AoEs, then at that point you're really not going to touch either. I can't even find my Wallaroo AoE. Okay, anyways, I was blind, sorry. But yeah, once you get your Wallaroo AoEs, you're not going to be touching Tatzelworm. So it's good for a set period. Even with the, for example, the Mystic Colossus change. Mystic Colossus is a 5 pip AoE that removes a shield, and then there's 290, while Tatzelworm Terror is doing 355, and it's an AoE and for 5 pips. So for a set period of time till you get to Wallaroo, it will be usable as a round 1 hit, right? That's just me being genuine. It will be actually usable than a round 1 hit because it will do more damage than Humunga Frog. Because what some people would do is just round 1 Humunga Frog. And you know, if you have max tier, it's 300 to 340. So it will still be, it's actually a good AoE for a set period, but once you go past that set period, you're not going to be using Tatzelworm anymore. And that's just me being honest, right? And then we can move on to the Path B variation, which is 415 mid damage, and then it gambits 3 traps and turns them into 50% traps. So for example, if you put like let's just use an elemental trap as an example. Let's say you do 415 mid damage, and then it turns all those elemental traps into 50% universal traps. I can see some viability here. It's not a bad spell because you can just literally toss that out and gambit them. But the other variations of other spells are actually better in my opinion. But still, for what it's doing, gambiting the traps, because you can just do some damage and gambit the leftover traps, and you can set up multiple hits with them. So that's my honest take with that. It's very interesting to see of how this is going to be used in advanced combat. I'm really looking forward to Witch's House Call the most, but Tatzelworm Terror is still going to be good to a certain extent, at least. And then we do have the Shadow Pact variation, or the fusion and whatnot, where you combine it with Nova, and you get the 3 different variations, or the 5 different variations of Tatzel technically, because you have the different tiers. But at max tier Path A, it's doing 1005 damage, and then it has a 50% to confuse the enemy for 1 round, and then it puts a Shadow Pact, which is you need to have traps on the enemy. Now this is really strong. The thing is though, this like I said, this is really strong, but requires you to have a shad, and you can use this as a turn 1 hit, and it's stronger than, for example, Mystic. Mystic with the Shadow Fusion is doing 790 and it's removing a shield, while Tatzel is doing 1005 and it's doing a 50% confuse. So they both have their own unique aspect in them. They are really good round 1 spells. At the same time, you do need traps on the enemy. If not, you lose 5% of your max HP per round. So that's something to be wary about. And then on top of that, you do need to get a shad round 1. So if you want to use this as like a round 1 hit, that's something to be wary about. But if you don't get that shad, it's not too viable. But it's a really strong AoE. I will say that's a really strong AoE. With the shad in hands, that is really strong. Then we have the Path B, which is a confusing one as well. I mean, we'll talk about it, but it's doing 700 myth damage, and then it puts 60% traps on the enemy, that are 3 of them, and then the Shadow Pact is having traps on yourself. Now, I think you guys get where I'm coming at. How does that even work? So, obviously you're going to remove a trap per round, but if this spell is putting 3 traps, unless these traps are technically its own separate thing and you need to have different traps, because it has the trap icon is not the same trap icon, right? So it's just like, you know. So it's possible that, or it's just going to take away those 60% traps per round. So technically it's just a 700 hit at that point. I don't know. I think I need a little bit more, or like, even for me, I need a little bit more elaboration on that Tatzelworm, because yeah, if it takes away those 60% traps, then the pack doesn't make sense other than just being a 700 hit. But if I want to do a 700 hit, I'd rather just use other spells at my arsenal to do 700 damage, you know? So that Path B is a little bit confusing, even for me. But if it doesn't take away those 60% traps, then it's fine because it'll just take whatever's underneath, like what other traps. But we'll have to see. That one needs a little bit more testing for me to understand it. Other than just reading card text, I actually need to see what that does in game compared to the other ones. So we'll have to see when it comes to Tatzelworm in game. But that top path, I will say, that max tier fusion, 1005 is strong. It is strong, but you do need that round one shad pip, and it'll be insane if you can pull that off. And just while you're questing and whatnot, that can literally nuke bosses. But who knows? People might make shad pip builds and whatnot. We'll just have to see what it looks like in game. So there's that. And then the last spell that got changed for Myth was Barbarian Saga. Now there was a huge point where everyone was using Barbarian Saga on Myth, and I feel like to a certain extent people still do, but I remember when Barbarian Saga was like good, people were spamming that, just saga into the saga into this, like literally. But currently in game, what it does, it's you know, it's a 6, 7, 8 pip spell, and then at max tier it's doing 1.1k, and then it puts a bomb on the enemy that's 610. So after 4 rounds it will detonate that. And then at pact B it was doing 560 mid damage, and then it would put 2 dots on the enemy that lasts 4 rounds that are doing 490 damage. So that's what saga looks like currently in game. Now we have a new saga. Now Barbarian Saga, that currently, or the new change, what it is without the shad, is max tier. It's doing 475 mid damage, and then it puts a 220 bomb on the enemy, which is a huge nerf. But just remember that the original saga was 8 pips, right? It went from 6 to 8, so you can see that there's going to be massive damage decrease, and on top of that it loses its shad. So some numbers to just even remember. And then path B is doing 480 damage, and then it gambits up to 3 shields for a 250 bomb that lasts 5 rounds. So there's some shield play at here, and honestly kind of interesting. I kind of want to see what how useful that bomb is going to be, but still very interesting regardless for saga. But let's actually look at the shadow enhanced version of saga, which is at max tier. It's doing 1.2k and then putting a 230 bomb. So this is stronger than the original saga that's currently in game. The 8 pip variation is only doing 1.1k, while this new one is doing 1.2k. And then the bomb is actually lower. The bomb currently in game is doing 610, while this one's doing 230. And I know the argument is, hey, well, that's a 6 pip and a shad, while the one that currently exists in the game is 8 pip. But even if we compare it to the 6 pip, I mean, yeah, if we compare it to the 6 pip variation of Barbarian Saga, the 6 pip variation is only doing 390 bomb, while this one's doing 230. But the hit of the original saga is doing 975, while the shadow fusion is doing 1.2k. So to a certain extent it is a buff. And then path B, we have a 920 myth damage hit, and then a 770 myth bomb. That's 2 bombs that last 5 rounds. Now, bomb meta is going to be crazy. I know that they're going to be changing how bombs work. I don't know when or how or what they're going to do, but apparently bombs are going to be slightly adjusted, and I don't know how that will be, but I don't think it's going to be in this update. But I know in the future bombs will be changed, so we'll have to see how Barbarian Saga looks like then. But currently as it exists, I'm not too sure if I'm going to be using it when it comes to advanced combat, rematches, whatnot. Or in challenge mode, I don't think I'm going to be using saga as much, but it's still kind of interesting, the fact that it is 920 and then it puts those 2 bombs, and those bombs are 770. So if you can combo with this, you can do some good damage. And on top of that, you are gambiting shields on yourself, because we're not gambiting, the shadow pact is shields, so you do need a shield on yourself per round. If not, you lose HP. So it's something to remember. And if if you already have the shields, you can technically do some crazy damage with this. But with all the utility spam that's going to be happening in this next update, it's going to be kind of, you're going to see weaknesses, so many weaknesses. You're going to see like a ring full of weaknesses, a ring full of traps, a ring full of blades, hot stots, whatnot. It's just going to be the norm. So that's something interesting to look forward to. But that's all the changes for Myth. You guys let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Honestly, out of all of them, I'm genuinely looking forward to Witch's House Call. Witch's House Call is crazy. The fact is, for the utility, you can just gambit 2 dots. But literally, if you gambit 2 dots, you can put 4 60% traps on the enemy. And then if you have the Shad variation, you just can get 70 feints. You literally just get advanced combat feints, 5 of them. I'm definitely going to be using this in any sort of like fight that I'm allowed to trap. 100%. If I'm allowed to trap, I am just gonna trap and dot. I guess if I can't dot but I can trap, then I'm gonna use the the shadow fusion variation, where it's like, hey, I don't care if I lose the 15% of my max HP, but at least I can put 70 feints on the enemy. Like, I'm definitely using this 100%. And then if it's a fight that I'm allowed to use dots and traps, bro, I'm just gonna gambit those dots right away and put 4 60% traps on the enemy. Why not? Literally, why not? So I'm looking forward to Witch's House Call the most. And then on top of that, I am semi looking forward to Tatzel, because you can gambit traps and turn them into 50% traps. So that's something to be wary about. So if it is a fight that I'm allowed to trap, but I don't want to go to the extent of Witch's House Call, I can still at least gambit some traps that I left on the enemy, turn them into 50% traps, and the next person that's hitting can use those and benefit from them strongly. So really good spells for Myth, in my opinion, and reinforcing that idea of feints are allowed in advanced combat, basically. So you guys let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Be on the lookout for more teasers. We do have more teasers coming up soon, as well as my teasers on Sunday. Just remember though, shout out to Sauce for all the teasers that he posted for today for his video, and definitely watch the original video. It's going to be down in the description to his video where he talks about the teasers. He's probably going to explain it more from a PvP perspective, but I was trying to look at it more from a PvE/advanced combat perspective. So some of the spells are good for PvE, some of the spells are good for advanced combat. I think Myth got an all-around decent change, in my opinion. That's it for me, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.